Okay, we're live back again for scripts on Saturdays after the two holiday weekends of sorts. The Canada Day last week and 4th of July this past Thursday. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. Healed up and looking forward to enjoying the rest of my summer.
Yeah,
So I'm hopefully the whole audience out there had a good holiday weekend, and this coming weekend as well. Or this, well, we're already into the weekend. It's Saturday, isn't it?
it's Saturday. That's right. Like the long weekend, I guess, started on Thursday for everybody, so they got one extra day on that long weekend. There's no holiday Monday as far as I know of. Um, so that's pretty sweet. You got a 4-day weekend. Not bad. Yeah, and then yeah, to your credit, yeah, you hopefully you get to enjoy this summer. Hopefully you're getting some good weather where you are. We haven't had a
Well,
heat wave yet, but it's
we're on the west coast here, and then the heat's definitely sinking in. Now, I mean, I'm talking in Canadian terms here. Um, you know, where we might reach 30 degrees Celsius. We might get into the upper 80s. I know some people will laugh and say that's not hot at all. It is here. For here, it's like the world is ending. Furnace weather, but nevertheless.
yeah. I mean, oh man, I miss my 30-35 degree weather. Which is around 80 to 90 or so. I've been to places where you know, the average temperature on within the stretch of summer is like 100 degrees, and I was
Yeah.
surprised how quickly I was able to adapt to that. After 2 days, it's like, okay, this is the normal now. Okay, my body's set. I'm good to go. And then you come back to Canada, and you're like, holy crap, it's chilly up here, and it's only like
Yeah.
27.
Yep.
Yep.
That's a good weather for a sweatshirt and a hoodie.
Hoodie, some jeans, just keep it
Yeah.
in there. But yeah, so yeah, everybody, yeah, so we're like getting sound is good from the chat. So thank you guys there. Um, Remember, if you're listening to this show either live or on the replay, please consider joining the Patreon. Not only do you find out what scripts we'll be reviewing on the following Saturday, but if you leave a comment there, we will read it live here on the show and discuss a little bit about that as well. And you can also show your support by, of course, sharing, maybe throwing in a super chat. No obligation, but it does always help because that goes to basically the operating costs of the software used to broadcast the show. So every little bit helps. But with that said, CC, you ready to get started with this one?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing the scripts, both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is CC Karaoke. This is your third time back, I believe?
It is.
Yeah, so here we go. Third time's a charm. Um, we've got a script that doesn't seem like it's high concept, but it does have some aspects to it. Its title is called Its Palette. That's the title of the script from the 2023 Blacklist. Excuse me. It's written by Zach Strauss, and it placed 56 with 9 votes. And that gives people pause, of course, but still, it's out of several hundred scripts that are sent to this competition every year. So that's something. CC, could you please share with the audience the log line for this week's script?
Sure. The log line is a woman who discovers she is suffering from severe synesthesia, synes- synesthesia, gets recruited into a secretive, cult like industry of color design by a mysterious corporation, but then uncovers the bloody, dark, and twisted reality of what it really takes to make the world's next great hues.
Yes, this has a lot of $10 words in it, but the synopsis is Dolly, a young woman with synesthesia, experiences the world through intense, emotion-driven colors. After finding a job uniquely suited to her affliction, she uncovers an incredibly competitive world of color and the lengths this company will go when picking the colors we see every day. So this, on the surface level, it's like, oh, it's a dark movie about colors. Like, who cares, right? I mean, I can see a lot of general audience members thinking that, but I was kind of curious about it as well because it's definitely a world we don't get a lot of um, exposure to, we don't think a lot about. Like, how often do you go out shopping and think, oh, I wonder why they chose this particular color of blue or red or green or anything across the spectrum of Roy G. Biv, right? Like, how often does that really enter our minds generally?
Yeah, and I mean, certainly placed next to a lot of the doldrum, and it's not to totally put down everything, but there's just a lot of sameness, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the last time I was on the show, we discussed a rom com, and it was all right, you know. But there's a lot of scripts that are pretty typical. I love to see things that are creative, unique, things that just sort of step out of that safe genre box and try to do something new and different, and you know, a little more explorative.
Yeah,
Uh,
something that's a different world within our own that we don't ever really think about, but could be intriguing to explore. Like that's kind of what made me kind of gravitate towards this script when I was like on my Patreon last year. I analyzed all the log lines. I had my opinions on them. This one here felt like it just felt quirky and weird, and not something you'd normally see scrolling through a Netflix or flipping through movie listings on the internet or what have you. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like that, who would think to talk about the world of colors, um, and and what those mean and why people do what they do and all that type of stuff. So I was kind of it piqued my interest onto that, um, and yeah. So we are definitely going to avoid some spoilers, but we also have some interesting news about the script, which we'll save towards the end here. But CC, share with us a little bit of your first impressions when you were reading the script, and then I'll back you up.
sure. I mean, when I first read the log line, I was interested because I'm, you know, I like I said, I've read a lot of samey log lines that don't excite me. But then I also thought to myself, okay, this does also feel like a definite. Like it's an art indie film. You're not gonna put $100 million behind it. You're not, you know, this is not. It should not be a big budget film. It's not something that you should expect to, you know, to enter the total cultural zeitgeist. But it's also the kind of movie that you sometimes just see at the award ceremonies, you know.
Yeah, like who
You know,
watched this?
right. Uh, and then I saw that it had placed 56th, and I thought, okay, is this better than where it's placed, or is it full of, uh, you know, bad decisions in the writing process?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into it, but I'll say it's not perfect, but I really enjoyed it. And my ultimate takeaway, again, not to spoil that, but my ultimate takeaway is I think what you already alluded to is it got me thinking about morality and just it's like I would if I was walking out of the theater from this movie, I would walk down the street and it would make me look at all the colors around me, all the logos, all the businesses, and think about the complexities of how that is designed and how it's designed to make us feel things, to get us to purchase the products that we purchase. Um, and I think in that sense, this was definitely effective. Uh, and if it can translate that to screen, I think it could be quite a good success, even if not a huge financial juggernaut. You know.
Yeah, it'd be a good exploratory success. Like, oh, look at how they took this idea and really kind of conveyed what it means and how it relates to society and how it relates to these characters and the levels with which people are going in order to achieve these outcomes that they're very much responsible for, that shape or at least influence a part of our lives to varying degrees. I was reminded by that speech from The Devil Wears Prada that Glenn Close gives about picking the color green, and how like the reason you're wearing that shirt is because the women in this room determined that you would like that shirt, and because of that color, that style, all those details that we don't really like, we don't process on the surface of our mind in the same way. And we have a parallel with that in this movie here. And I really thought when I was reading it, I thought the first few pages were really strong because you have this underdog character who's named Dolly, and we're introduced to her as a little girl, and she's like got this like clumps of wax, like candle wax or something, wedged in her ears, because we find out that she translate her auditory senses translate into vivid colors through her eyes, and it causes her a lot of distress and pain. And the opening is really strong because you have this bully that's making fun of her for having this affliction, and he's not just verbally abusing her, he's physically like on top of her and kind of messing with her. And she defensively hits him in the eye with this garden apparatus on the playground.
They're meant to be 10 years old at this time, just
Yeah.
for context, right? This is not like a grown man bullying a grown woman. This is kids on the playground, and he's bullying her as a 10-year-old male bully would, and she's defending herself in that moment, right?
Yep. And
She's
a lot of
overwhelmed. Yeah.
very overwhelmed. I mean, I like the vivid nature of it, where where the script describes like things turn red, the bully's face turns demonic, and there's cries of all these other frightened children around, which are just amplifying all the colors that she is experiencing. That's making it hard for her to digest the information that's around her. And so she strikes this kid in the eye, and we then kind of cut to a majestic blue sky, and then essentially a hospital / prison ward where Dolly has been there for at least 10 years. And I don't know about you, because we learned this in Canada where I was. I'm certain you learned it as well in basic in high school, which is the Young Offenders Act, which has been changed to something else recently.
Yeah, and that was kind of the first point in the script where I was like, okay, I'm not. I appreciate that we've switched to this scene, and I don't reject it, but I need more explanation.
Yeah.
A 10-year-old girl should not still be in a hospital ward that many years later unless there was escalating circumstances. There have to have been further incidents, I would think.
Yeah, repeated effects. Yeah.
And I will say in this, I don't think this is a spoiler. I mean, because I believe this was just said pretty early in the script.
It is, yes.
She killed the boy, right?
Yeah. The injury resulted in his death, and I'm thinking, okay, even if this was like 10 years ago or something, there's what issues around that circumstance would essentially she's being tried for as an adult and was in prison for 10 years.
Yeah, and
under
there's
psychological
no way a
evaluation.
10-year-old girl. There's no way a 10-year-old girl will be tried as an adult and get 15 or 20 years.
Yeah,
it's an awful thing that happened, but
it's quite a stretch.
Have had.
Yeah,
she would have had to have been. I would believe that she would be sent to a hospital.
Yes,
I believe that she would have been, in that hospital full time, but then she would have had to have proceeded to have further bad behavior and really like not adapt, right? In order to remain for that length of time. And the script does not illustrate this point. Now, I don't think it would take a whole lot to add that, but I do think we need a little bit of something to indicate that she has struggled through this process over the years. And what they do instead, and I do love this idea. They go to her journal, right? She has a journal where she does feel really, really awful about what happened, and she has a purposeful, motive every day to do good deeds, right? To help people, and then she writes it in her journal. Said today I did this good thing for this person, just because she's trying to make amends. She's trying to
right a wrong that can possibly never be righted. Like that's kind of how I looked at it, and I thought it's a really clever way to make us empathize with this character who is still living with the regret of that action, and who knows what other actions may have come. But yeah, I mean, it was one heck of a stretch to basically say, yes, this little girl who is clearly in self-defense struck this bully on top of her within hundreds of witnesses. That it was established on a playground, lots of people, lots of parents around all saw, and yet she's in this situation. it feels like this would probably be the most traumatic moment for her, but you need one extra moment to be like, oh, this is where we have the pattern of behavior that has got her into the situation. Whereas, because it's established that it's a Bellevue prison / hospital, where I think maybe they could have just gotten rid of the prison part, just said she's in an institution. Like,
Yeah, we don't need the prison part. A hospital ward is perfectly fine.
right.
And I would say that's a kind of a recurring theme for me with this script is these are not issues that are breaking to the script, right? But they're little details that should probably be patched up. I love the journal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But going straight to the journal, literally a page later in the script from this traumatic incident, we're really honing in on how much she has worked to be a better person without just inserting that one thing ahead of it. It's a lot of whiplash, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to know that she's struggled, and then we can certainly appreciate that she has why she's still there, because she's struggled, but now she is because she's worked so hard to recover, and she's reached this day at which she's finally getting out, right?
Yep.
And I want to attach one more comment here
Go
because
for it.
just to further on this point, they illustrate her good deeds, right? Her cellmate is about to go for shock therapy, and they illustrate this good deed by having Dolly, our main character, pretend to be her cellmate and take the electroshock therapy. Now, this is it's a detail thing. It's like, first of all, okay, I had to Google this. Do they still do electroshock therapy?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently they do, but they do it under general anesthesia, not like you see in the movies and TV shows,
Or they're
that are
fully
depicting
conscious.
the
Yeah,
60s.
yeah.
Yeah. And the script sort of indicated that she was fully conscious during this procedure. And then I also had to ask myself, just logically, I mean, would the hospital staff really mistake her for her cellmate? Maybe. If it was the 1960s, maybe.
Yeah.
But then it indicates in her journal that this is 2022. And again, this is just a point where I thought to myself, this story does not need to be set in a specific year. It really might be better served to be completely undefined.
Yes.
Not the world we're living in today. It doesn't have to include Facebook or McDonald's. We don't need any real identifiers. It can be, it could be a couple hundred years in the future for all we know.
Right.
Or it could be the 1960s. I think it would really be well served as just kind of being a broader sort of scope of, the structure of society in that way. And then we don't have to have those logical errors in our brain that say, wait, this doesn't, jive with how I know, that things should go.
Yeah, because
in 2022, there's no way they're going to mistake one cellmate for the other, unless this institution is totally,
run poorly. Which, I mean, that's not unplausible. But I think the fact is that her and her cellmate aren't described to be similar enough in physicality. The way that they hoodwink the staff is they just switch shirts because they have different different prisoner numbers on them, and then like that's all they're going to check to make sure like they don't verify this. No one's ever thought, hey, I'm gonna knock out my a person, a rival I have, and I'm gonna switch my shirts with them in this and let them take the electroshock therapy where I don't have to worry about that thing anymore. It's kind of revenge for them. I don't know, stealing my pillow or something to do with cigarettes or confection, any type of whatever prison nature you have in there. You have to give us some sort of plausibility. In this case here, they don't describe that Dolly's cellmate is also like got the same hair color and height, because you could make it easy. It's like, oh, okay, she's scuffled her hair to obscure parts of her face because she's supposed to be, quote unquote, demented, and that's their gimmick to like, okay, they're not going to really look too much of her face because she looks like she's the weird creepy kid from The Ring. They just check her number. They don't really want to look at her, and then they move her on. Okay, maybe you're allowing me to at least suspend my disbelief a little bit easier that way. But in this case here, the script literally just has, the guard looks at the chart, looks at the number, says, okay, this is the one, and then just moves it as if it's a corpse lying on the gurney, so to speak.
And honestly, I would almost say the solution is just to rewrite that with a simpler. I get what they're going for, to have something significant to really like impress upon us right off the bat
Mm-hmm.
that Dolly is not doing small things, but small things do impact an audience too, right? I mean, why not have them sitting in a cafeteria or something like that, and and her cellmate doesn't, is doesn't have the food or something like that, and she gives up her food or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, something small, something that is a good deed but adds up, because her journal is also supposed to be filled with pages and pages of these things, right? So they should include lots of small deeds. And
Yeah,
again,
I agree.
right after this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just a small logical error, nothing that can't be fixed with a couple of rewrites, right? But she, we get it, we get an impression of just how much challenge she's having, because we started, she has this earwax right in her ears.
Mm-hmm.
I would have just gone with earplugs. Earwax is cool, but earplugs is much like, what would a 10-year-old child be able to actually get that she could use to plug her ears, right?
Right.
It's not going to be something so complex as a ball of wax necessarily. And if it is, you have to explain how she got a hold of a ball of wax. Probably earplugs. So here, we've established that this character is constantly wearing noise canceling plugs, right? Because she can't handle the world when she can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
She's, it's like the doctor says, well, you're not. Like, she's trying to get into a place that has disability support for the deaf, and the doctor says, well, you're not deaf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a recurring concept throughout the script, that because she won't let herself hear the world around her, people talk to her in sign language.
And yeah, she's
And
fluent in sign language, and she wants to work with those that are hard of hearing because it's the most comfortable situation for her. But it's got the caveat, which is that, well, you don't qualify because you yourself are not hard of hearing. Like, you may be fluent in sign language, you may block out all external noises, but you can read lips and you can sign, but we also know you can hear. So you don't, if
yeah,
there's any sort of scrutiny with regards to your placement there, it would be taken and you'd be ejected. So we're not even going to entertain the idea.
so I appreciate this character development, and I'm invested in her and how that will impact um, the story being told going forward. What they do right that moment, is they have her take a wire out of her bra, right?
Mm-hmm.
That she's hidden there, and she inserts the wire into her ear like self harm, because she's so overwhelmed with the sound that, and she, that she had, like, I at least the impression I got, she's almost trying to actually deafen herself
Yeah.
to burst her eardrum. And it's a powerful moment, especially if you film it well. But then we get again this jarring transition where the scene, like, she collapses on the floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blood dripping out of her ear, and the very next scene is that she's out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And I could not make sense of that. That somebody who surely if she's collapsed on the floor with that, having done that to herself, the doctor's going to notice. She has a bandage over her ear. The script tells us she has a bandage over her ear, and yet they still released her the next day. Now, I understand an overwhelmed system, which in the system in real life is overwhelmed. They probably want to get her out of there. I get that, but I still need some kind of logical explanation for the fact that she did that and they still released her the next day. There's no,
Yeah, it
I just
feels
need
like
something.
yeah, it feels like they'd be like, well, you know what? We'll release you from the hospital, but you're going back to your cell and you're under observation, and we're not going to do that because, yeah, she does that. It's so weird. Um,
I mean, I love
because
the
this
idea.
happens
I was
right
I was
after the
impacted by
electroshock
it.
therapy. Like, that's the other part too. It's like it's all
Yeah,
these things that.
like Yeah, both those things, like, and you would assume they're gonna figure out. You would hope they would figure out, or at least I need some explanation that they figured out or didn't figure out that she took that for her cellmate, the electroshock therapy. So that's a lot of things that she's not, she's not well the very day before she's released, and the doctor should be aware of it. It's powerful, right?
Hmm.
But I'm not saying that they should take that out of the script. I just, again, I need some sort of transition buffer here.
Yeah, because it goes from
Uh,
that, and then she's working at like a printing and packaging company, and like she with all these other inmates and stuff. This is like their second chance program. So we're kind of like she does that. She falls, hits the floor unconscious. We don't go to a hospital right away. We go to the second chance stuff where she's just fine. It's like uh weird because she's got the bandage over her ear. Nobody's questioning. Nobody's doing anything. Like to your point, like she's at work and she's injured, and it's like, well, okay, so she clearly has the bandage over here, which means she's been treated, but she's now back at work. We don't know how much time has really been there, but it's still enough for that. She's still got sporting the bandage, so it can't be too much time. And
yeah, and the bandage obviously tells you that she was seen too
yes,
with that.
and then we get into this place where we got her supervisor, who is this fat, bald, leering guy who, grabs women for quote unquote evaluations that are held privately in his office, and he's got this dead tooth that's purple and really hideous. And I'm like, I like the visuals of this, and I like the fact that second chance work programs do take advantage of people, whether they're male or female, not necessarily always in the assault department, but definitely exploit them. And it's like, okay, we get this. You're really letting us know that she and all the other people around her are underdogs. They're not in positions of where they can fight back too much. There's a lot at stake for any type of resistance they may provide, and you kind of feel for her in that part. And then we we just kind of follow her day. Like she takes a subway back to her prison cell, or actually before she does that, she goes to a public care facility, and she
Right, where she donates blood.
yeah, she donates blood, and then she also looks for her mom, who's suffering from
Yeah.
cancer and is in a coma, and she wants to be next to her and see her. And because she doesn't have ID, but she knows the name of the person, a male nurse named Lenny overhears, and she's like, "Oh, I know who you are. Yeah, she's good. Come see her. Mom's been asking for her and whatnot." And so that gets them together, and we find out that Lenny, yeah, he's a male nurse in his 50s who works a lot. He's kind of a workaholic, and he's kind of framed as the potential love interest for Dolly in this moment here, even though he doesn't really quite like her because Dolly hasn't really visited much since he started working, at least. Like that's his kind of angle towards her.
Oh, it raises a couple of points in my mind. First
Mm-hmm.
of all, that the scripts we see a lot of scripts that have way too many characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I really like about this script is you have Dolly, and it focuses on Dolly, where we don't have 20 characters to follow. This is really her story, right? And in that sense, Lenny is the first character of any substantialness beyond Dolly who is a part of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not way too many things to keep track of. And Lenny's an interesting character. We'll touch on that in a moment. I just want to reiterate the details, right?
Sure. Yeah. Go
She
ahead.
goes to a blood bank and donates blood. How is she allowed to donate blood if she's packed with medications and all sorts of other things, and she just got out of the hospital in her position? It's a bit of a logical leap. But maybe she could. Maybe this place isn't really checking too hard. Okay, fine. And as you mentioned, we jump right into her, and she's at this place of work, and she seems just fine. And you know what? I like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I want more of that development of her character. I love this character, and I really am I think the script does a great job of drawing me into caring about her. But there is a big conflict with her that I think needs to be focused on more. And Lenny's a great opportunity to focus on that conflict, right? She has this journal. She's doing good deeds.
Mm-hmm.
And, visiting the mother is something that she's been putting off. Obviously, she hasn't been able to visit this place because she's been locked up. That's understandable to a degree.
Yeah, this is her first
but
entry into the work program and getting back into society. This is something she's had to wait many years for.
Right. But like a core part of her character is that she is doing these great deeds, but she has this fear, this conflict in herself that maybe she's not a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she doesn't actually care about the well-being of others. Maybe she's actually, completely dead inside. And I would love to see a bit more emphasis, just quiet emphasis on the fact that she can flip a switch in her brain,
Mm-hmm.
Because then the idea that she's gone from this sort of traumatic day in jail to being, generally with it at work, we understand it a bit more, right?
Right. Yes.
I'd love to see her not react. And the reason I say this with importance to Lemmy is because Lemmy has had a traumatic incident of his own, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, good one too.
He fell asleep at the wheel with his family in the car, and his family died, and he feels responsible for that.
Yep. And
And
he's in the position
that,
where like
oof.
he wasn't punished for it, aside from losing his wife and child. Like there was just, I mean, there is no alcohol was involved apparently. No one else was hurt. It was just he's the survivor, so he's got survivor's guilt. That's plaguing him.
Oh, I mean, and he's in a bad way over it. Like he can't really live with himself over it, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
and the script indicates this as we go along, that he's just like he's turned to drugs to detach from the pain of his reality.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical types of drugs, like not the street level. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like that's why he's a nurse. That's why he's working all the time. He's got access to a lot of pain medication that's specific to emergency rooms and continuing care centers and whatnot. And he is just trying to distract himself every day from the pain that he's suffering from by working and doping. And he's still got an edge to him because he still recognizes that, because he doesn't like Dolly at first. He thinks that she's trying to make up for lost time now because her mother is in a coma and stage 4 cancer and all that stuff. Like the guilt has finally hit her, as opposed to appreciating the family that she has. But it's far deeper than that between all three of these characters, which I was really quite shocked that that level of thought was presented in this story.
It's one of my favorite aspects of the script.
Mm-hmm.
Is the characters are believable. They are each of them struggling with something that they can't overcome, a pain, kind of trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see how each of them deals with it separately. That's why I was mentioning Dolly, because Lenny's way of dealing with it, obviously drugs.
Yeah.
Dolly's way of dealing with it has been this journal, right? Because she is trying to convince herself that she's a good person, that she does enough good deeds, puts enough good into the world, that is what defines her. But at the same time, she's not struggling in the way that Lenny is. It doesn't mean that her way of struggling with it is invalid. But Lenny is literally, coming apart at the seams, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think that Dolly necessarily is. With the way that Dolly comes apart at the seams is with her actual synesthesia, right? That she's overwhelmed by the world. and yes, the trauma affects her, but she's also battling with whether or not that's something that 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 she just is a like that she is violent, and
Yeah.
that she should accept that part of herself. And I don't mind that being really part of the story, you know?
No, because it's
Because
part of her
yeah,
fear, right? Because she feels that
exactly.
because when she can hear things, she's seeing these horrifying images, that it questions her own sanity as to whether or not she's a good person. Because if she's seeing all these violent colors and images and stuff because of sound, it's making her fear the herself and the outside world, because those violent images, those sounds caused her to kill that bully, and she's terrified that if she succumbs to that, she is going to become the bad person that got her to this position in the first place, and she's trying to find any means or any options she can explore to say, I'm not really that person. But even she herself is not convinced. And I thought that was a great means of exploration. And this all happens within the first 15 pages of the script. Like, they really kind of burn through this quickly, but it's poignant and it's strong and it doesn't feel glossed over. Well, there are a couple of little areas that could have been explored maybe with an extra half page or page more of content. It really does move the pace along to understanding and empathizing with Dolly, and then connecting a little bit with Lenny, because Lenny's reveal doesn't come till at least the second act. But I mean, there's clearly tells that Lenny's not all there.
Yeah, that doesn't have to be kept a total secret from the audience either. I mean, there'd be
Right.
nothing wrong with subtly having the marks on his arm. You don't tell us straight up until the second act, but we know it, right?
Yes, it's conveyed. But I like the fact that this kind of just sets up who she is, and it's a strong foundation, because while she's going home on the subway, some guy knocks her down, and she loses one of her earpieces, and she's all of a sudden on this black box on the subway. She actually starts seeing a message, and it's like, if you can read this, come to Palette. And she saw it, and then she put her earpiece back in, and it vanishes. And she sits down. She's trying to find her notebook, journal, to write in what it was saying, and then she takes her a minute to realize that the only way she was able to see that message is if she could take out the noise suppressing device that she has in her ear. And I was like, that's really cool. That's an intriguing thing about it. And this is what happens because we have this other stake that the prison has put in place, which is she has a workplace placement program, but she has to find another job outside of that as well, where she can be, on her own recognizance of sorts, like where she can be self-sufficient. And so because she saw this ad, and under these peculiar means, she decides to explore it, and she goes to Palette, and she meets Pearl, who's like the a personal assistant to one of the people there. And it opens up this world of, oh, this is a company that has a lot of people that work for it that have an eye for color, and what those colors mean to individuals emotionally, psychologically, etc. And if you have an eye for that, this is where they're looking for people like you. And because her synesthesia is a phenomenon that has a sensory crossover that allows her to see colors through auditory stimuli, and also other visual stimuli far more sharply than anyone else, she is considered a very unique individual. Because there's other people that have different stages of it, but hers is like a very specific type. I believe they refer to it as chromesthesia. And
Yes.
and we get introduced to like the head honcho of Palette, named Latrice, who's in her 50s. She's got like this cool sunglass eye patch on, and she takes interest in Dolly, because Dolly, when she shows up there, she basically says, "Yeah, I read the sign, and that's why I'm here." And that's what Latrice has done this to try and find people like Dolly, to have that, who have that sense to pick up a color that's difficult to see, or pick up a message, whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's a very inventive way to kind of get people and sort of screen potential employees. It's like, if you can read this sign, you're who we need. And Dolly is that person. And we get this really cool test that they put Dolly through, which is basically ordering the colors from like light to dark, and you have to do it within under 3 minutes. And Dolly does it, but not so well and Latrice is about to kick her out until she notices the noise canceling earpiece, and she's like, take them out and do it again. And Dolly is very resistant. She doesn't want to do that. She's terrified, and Latrice realizes what's going on, and now she becomes this mentor figure. And it's like really it's such a quick twist, but it feels authentic. It's like, oh, she's like picking up exactly what that Dolly's gone through trauma. She's terrified of this sense that she has. And Latrice is like, I need you, and you need to be comfortable with this gift that you have and not look at it as a curse like you've been told to look at it for all these years. And she just eases her. It's like, you're going to be in the room all alone. No one else can hear you. There'll be no one outside other than me. All sound will be gone. Just focus on the colors. Sort them from light to dark as quickly as you can. And, you know, it's a really decently paced scene, and I thought it was pretty cool. And then she does it quickly, and Latrice has got this big, you know, she's elated. She's like, you're what she needs in order to keep this company, you know, at the top, so to speak.
Yeah, and I really like how they position Latrice as a mother figure. There's this nice dynamic there because Dolly does kind of need or want for that kind of nurture. Mm-hmm. And Latrice positions herself to be a very nurturing mother kind of figure.
And
the other thing
go ahead, yeah, please.
The other thing I really like about this sequence is how grounded it is. Because when I first, before I read the script, part of me was expecting something really just kind of out there. I wasn't expecting it to be, you know, very kind of in reality. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, I think with the log line, it feels like, you know, it feels very kind of science fiction, right?
Science fiction, fantasy, you know, is it going to be out there type of thing? Right, yeah.
But this company, like when she walks into it, it's just, it's a regular company, right? I mean, mm-hmm. There are school children going on tours. This is not presented as a secret society.
No, it's
not
very
presented
public.
As having there's no like crazy technology involved. Yeah, she has to order these 100 colors, these like the bottle caps with different colors, right, to create a perfect color wheel.
Yeah,
it's, you know, there's no big tech here. They're just bottle caps on a table. You know?
And linseed oil and stuff like and mirrors and you know, acrylic glass and all that type of stuff, just all to try and find and create new colors. And of course synthesize more colors and more dyes and everything to be used in all these other aspects. I mean, they have these banners of like their most cherished colors and the names of them, and they're all associated with like companies and logos that everyone would recognize, and it's implied that they're the ones that develop these colors that the companies bought and used on their product to make them successful, more successful, if anything.
It's very believable and relatable because, you know, you can imagine if you're starting a company of your own, and you're branding it, and somebody is going to give you this list of colors that you can choose, and you've probably come across it in your life. These really wild color names, right? Mm-hmm. Creative things. It's like, it's blue. No, it's got some. It's like, it's sky blue. It's royal blue, and then maybe it's like it's. I don't know, blueberry blue.
Blueberry blue. It's sunrise blue or something. Yeah, like there's all these sort of these definitions and variations, and it's like, oh yeah, you gotta take like level of hue, the saturation, all those things. They're not just your flat numbers that you get out of a normal Photoshop program, but like they have a range that's so beyond anything else that we would recognize at first, because they're generating these new colors that are similar but different, and even just a slight variation elicits another type of response. And it's like a big world, but it feels very much organized, and it's not, you know, it's not like a cabal or anything of that nature. And I thought that was pretty cool, and I liked a little bit of the tour guide stuff, how they they talked about how there are certain shades of blue that actually have been known to actually help people kind of mend or heal a little bit faster or a little bit more appropriately with less stress and less, behavioral issues and whatnot. And this really kind of resonates, with Dolly.
There's a gym chain here in Vancouver called Orange Theory. I see it all over the city.
Oh, I know them. Yeah.
And you look inside the window and it's like everything is this particular shade of orange. The lights, everything is just like they are going for this whole thing. Like that particular shade of orange is the key to your fitness goals.
Yeah, it drives you to do more for your gains.
Yeah.
But
and I admit sometimes I feel like I want to walk in there and see what it's all about because that orange is drawing me in somehow.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the case. I mean, when I was even doing like the color palette here, I was like, well, I like blue's my favorite color, so I like that. So what's a good approachable blue? And then I found one that worked, and I was like, yeah, this is what I like. This is the one my eye keeps gravitating towards too. Maybe other people's eyes will gravitate towards that, and that's what I used. And that's as complex as I made it. But when you read a script like this, you realize they're thinking on levels far beyond just, oh yeah, this looks nice. They've got an archive of books of history of colors and discovery and how they made them from way back in like thousands of years ago up to the more recent stuff. Because Dolly achieves this sorting of hues so quickly, Latrice literally takes her under her wing and says, listen, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about this industry, making it, you're hired, you're working for me now, we're going to get you an apartment. It's basically like, Charlie getting the golden ticket and then from Willy Wonka being told, yeah, you're going to now be in charge of my chocolate factory when I retire. And
I'd like to see an extra page in the script here too for that.
Yeah.
Show us all the testing. Show us like rooms of test subjects being shown different colors because that's what they're doing, right? They're testing and eliciting reactions from test subjects, right? Like they're gaining that data. They're doing studies to see how people react to these shades. I would love to see the movie give us a couple minutes here to really impress how much work they're putting into gaining that information.
Yeah, because they do in the second act they address it, but they kind of do it really too quickly for my liking. But one of the other things that they do address, that they spend a little bit of time on, not a lot, but a little bit of time on, is they say, like Dolly acknowledges how there's like no men that work here, and there's actually a real scientific reason for this. This is one that I know. I googled this, and that is women actually have genetically a better receptive nature to colors than men do. They see them in a slightly different way, and that's what makes them more attuned to this line of work. It's like they can pick up the subtle differences between two shades of the same color that most men by and large can't. And I'm like, okay, well that explains why it's a female centric or female heavy in cast of characters, because it goes in hand in hand with the business. It's not contrived. It's not only wedged in here because of this, where we would otherwise logically ask, well, why is this entire, in the Army, in this entire platoon, why is it only, women? And it's not just part of a women's thing, but there's two guys and it's all women. And it's like, well, that doesn't seem kind of balanced or anything fair. Or like, oh, now we're doing something with, the first NFL team that is all women and they're playing against NFL characters. Male NFL players. Like, well, that's a little extreme. Like it doesn't jive. There's no authenticity to it. But here, we're just like, no, we have had men work here, but they don't see the shades as definitively as women tend to do, and so we select women, but we don't just select any women. You have to be able to pick up the level that we require. That's why they go through this testing. And so you realize, okay, there's a gender preference based on the science, and then there's a merit preference on top of that. So it doesn't matter that you're just, a woman that can see color. You have to be able to see this range of color, and you have to be able to identify it and whatnot. And what's interesting is the personal assistant of Pearl, she kind of represents a little bit of that. Like, she loves color, she can see it, but she can't see it as well as all the other people that work there, which is why she's stuck in the personal assistant position. So, like, even though she meets a lot of the qualifications. She doesn't meet all the merit qualifications that get her to the next level. So that's why, even though she's been there longer, when Dolly comes in, Dolly's now her boss because she's just got the natural skills that they're looking for. She may not have the experience, but she's got the stuff that she's looking for. And through this journey at this company, she will gain the experience. It's all about like taking your natural skills and refining them to get them at the level that's required to be successful in this industry. And I was fascinated by this journey and how they were doing it and how they're introducing all the other characters. Like, you have Bryn, you've got who's another got a passionate eye for a color. You have Sydney, who's really good at what she does, and then you have Chumani, who's Sue, who knows where to find colors. Like, she's got a very good eye and good understanding of nature and the world, and be like, okay, if we're going to go on this trip, which is this next part of the script, we're going to go on this trip. You're going to remove all cell phones, all technology, whatnot. We're just going to go, and we're just going to try and see if we can find colors that we can, mix, match, and find something new that we can take back with us and replicate and possibly sell to a client for something. And I was like, this is cool that we got this very broad set of characters that each have their own specialty that complements the company, but also allows these women to still be in competition with each other.
And I like how the script sets this part up as well, because it's a company that you wouldn't suspect as to be anything other than a regular company, right? It's very grounded. Like I said, you have school children going for tours, but there is something a little bit unsettling about it. And as the audience, we do need to probably relatively quickly pick up on the idea that this isn't totally wonderful.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of an underlying cult aspect. And with these characters, they are setting up a competitiveness, right?
Yeah.
Which is normal in a healthy company. That's true. But you have this secret board of people who don't just make colors but change the world. It's a kind of a secretive top brass promotion level that you might really want to do anything you can, whatever it takes to prove that you are the best.
That you are the best,
and rise to the top of this company.
These are the people that came up with like the shade of white that Apple uses. Like, that's what elevates them to, the board.
Yeah, yeah. So I also like. I mean, there's a scientific explanation for it all being women, but there's also a little. I think that also kind of convinces you that it's a bit cultish too, right?
Yes. Which is a good setup. I mean, that's what I liked. Yeah.
And these women, they get along. They seem to be friends, but it's also established in multiple different points here that they are in competition with each other. It's teamwork, and as a team, they will, because it does mention, and I like that too. There's a little bit of like the power of many. That reference comes up in the script, not word for word, but it's inferred that the company is saying that there is a power to the collective.
Yes,
which I thought was pretty cool. But at the
not
same
for the
time,
sake of it being like not for the sake of it being used in the other property that's using it. It's very different aspect here. It's more authentic.
Yeah, it's smartly used. It's like there's an ominousness to that, right?
Yes,
and the writer clearly understands that. But all the while, it's also promoting a culture where these women who are being told that they are powerful as a collective need to step over each other because because it's like, who is willing to do the most to achieve that color, to be the next person who picks up that perfect shade of white that makes apple.
Or that perfect shade of orange that's used on the Florida Florida logo of the sunshine state for me to tongue twisted there for me. So it's like it's all of those things, and this kind of excavation of this land in upstate New York, where they're looking for charcoal and sulfur and whatnot. They end up finding a dead hiker. who's got this weird pink crystallization forming on part of her body because it's been ravished a little bit by like wild animals and whatnot. And Dolly discovers this and it freaks her out. And Sydney, who's like her partner in this particular event, is trying to tell her like, well, yeah, it's sad that she's dead, but look at the color on that stuff. Like, and it's, you really see this kind of dark attitude where this is where we kind of realize that Dolly might actually start being in touch with her humanity more than she even thought at first, because Sydney just kind of is like, yeah, it's a dead body, but this is the color. This is what we need in order for our business. And she's encouraging, like, let's scrape some of the samples off the body and use it. And Dolly's like, no, we can't do that. That's horrifying. We can't. It's the desecration of the body. We have to tell somebody that we found this person. And Sydney's like, okay, fine. Look, like there's some of it forming on her backpack and stuff. We'll scrape it off of that. Is that okay with you? And Dolly's like, yeah, I guess. We just have to help this, this person, or at least report that they found this person. And what ends up happening? Well, they find the color, which impresses Latrice, and then they get bonus points because they're also heroes for finding this lost hiker and giving closure to a family that had been searching for her for some time. And you're like, okay, so there's the good deed part that Dolly will then put into her journal. And I noticed that she left out the new color part in that. Like, that wasn't important to put into the amends journal. And I'm like, that really defined me a little bit more of what Dolly was like. Like, she knew her priorities. And it's like, okay, she is more human than we thought at this point. Like it removes a little bit more of that doubt, and we realize that she's just kind of a lost person, and rediscovering herself. And I was quite impressed with that moment.
Yeah, same here. And it also built the other characters in the company, like you mentioned, that there is that conflict where it's what is the greater good, right? Because this body, it was a person. You don't feed on the dead,
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, the moral explanation from her coworker and from the company is, but how many lives are we going to save with this color? This new hue that we create, could actually save lives.
It could
So
save
it doesn't
lives.
matter. It doesn't matter what we do to the body because of what we'll be able to get out of it.
Yeah, like it could be used for like a cancer ribbon, or it could be used to a company that employs hundreds of thousands of people. Like, they don't know. Like, they're just speculating, but they do know that if you find that right color, it always has a positive effect. With at least the way that they use it so much. I mean, they haven't said, oh yeah, we made this color to get people to go crazy. Like, no, they don't do that. They actually kind of try to, they log that color and they hide it away, and they know, like, we have to avoid this type of thing. Because that takes us into like the act 2, which is a prison is looking, it has a big issue with violent inmates, and they want to paint the cells a color that would get them to be less violent. And so they have to experiment with that. And this is where Dolly learns of something which I thought was really kind of beautiful, is she's researching, the colors and hues that, are calming and are nurturing and whatnot. And she notices that a subtle blue light helps reduce stress and everything. And when she goes to visit her mom in the hospital, she notices the curtains are a soft and useful blue, and she hangs it over top of the fluorescent light, which is a bit harsher and colder, and it puts this warm light on the mom. And when she comes back a few days later, the mom is now responding better to the treatment, and her blood pressure's kind of returned to normal, and a lot of her readouts are in a far more positive rate. And so much so that the hospital actually adopts this and applies it to all the other patients there as well. And it's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting development here.
and it would be so easy to write this palette industries as being completely self-serving,
Right.
that they're just creating these colors to advance their own purposes, and that like it's all for the money and all that. They paint this company in a way that this is something the company believes in, that they appreciate what Dolly would have done here with this blue shade of hue in the hospital, and that this is what they are. You know, as a reader of the script and as a viewer of the film, I would believe that. I would honestly believe this company is intending to do good with the
Yeah.
hues they create, and that is their motivation, right? It's not just that they are totally twisted and evil or anything like that, you know.
No, they're
Um,
complicated, which I think makes it work better because from that example we got earlier on, which is, yeah, we're willing to desecrate a dead body to get a color that will have a rippling of positive effect to the rest of the world. But it's like, well, do those ends really justify the means? And that's the question. And that's also
which
part of the theme of this movie, of the
which
script.
we get into in Act Two with the prison, right?
Yeah.
Because they are tasked, um, and later with a further task, which we can get into a little bit. But with this particular task, they are tasked to reduce the violence in prisons by creating a color theme, right?
Hmm.
That will calm agitated people.
Yes, and the two finalists of this color are down to Sydney and Dolly, and they both come up with their own. Sydney has this really interesting purple that she likes, that is good, and then Dolly has another hue, which I thought I wrote it in my notes, but I guess it's escaping me at the moment.
Was it sapphire?
I think it's a
I can't
sapphire,
remember
yeah.
for sure.
So it's a little bit more on the bluer side, and the sapphire does well, but not enough. And when they do the purple, it starts off strong, and then all of a sudden the prisoner just starts smashing his head against the bars, self-harm and whatnot. And it's freaking everybody out to the point where, like, they try to hose him down and then get him away, and he's he goes into oh wait, it wasn't the sapphire. Yeah, it's the sapphire one. So something happens with Dolly's color that causes
Yeah,
extreme violence. And Dolly is really guilt-ridden about it because the prisoner, he's going to be okay, but he did so much harm to himself, and she's freaking out. She's trying to figure out what happened and how that that occurred. She thought she mixed all the colors correctly, etc., etc. And yeah, it's now this mystery. It's like, did someone taint her supply? And apparently Latrice comes in and says, yes, yeah, you used this color within this shade, which caused this emotional reaction. You made a mistake. I'm sorry. We haven't figured out the color yet, but you're not meeting up the expectations that we needed. And like, as Dolly is looking into this and whatnot, she kind of suspects that Sydney did something to her color, and she goes to her place to challenge her on that. Be like, hey, did you spike my color with this thing that caused this reaction? And Sydney is just kind of partying alone, listening to loud music and kind of messing around, and they get into a conflict. And
there is a further motivation we have to mention because
go for it, yeah.
right, they get into a conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
But prior to this conflict, prior to Dolly going over to Sydney's, something that struck me was that Dolly finds out how Sydney created the color, right?
Right.
She finds out that Sydney had captured an animal and had been torturing it in order to excrete the materials from the animal necessary to create her color, right?
Yes, we get the basement labs where
Yeah,
we find that some animals and are being tortured, but they secrete through, like, their bladder or some other type of orifice a color that can be used.
and the other reason I bring this up is because I think the script needs very badly to expand upon this particular point. It never really, I mean, we can take it for granted as understanding it, but, like, okay, let's say that Sydney's color wins.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're going to have to create a lot more of it, which means they're going to have to torture a lot more animals to get it, right? I mean, this animal, like, it's in a bad way. It's like, it's described as looking at her at Dolly, like, with pleading eyes, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to tug at our heartstrings here. But I mean, look, if this color is successful, that means they're going to have to get more of it. whatever the means is that you achieve this color, you're going to have to continue to produce it. And I don't think the script ever really gets into that.
It kind of
And
glosses
we
over
can,
it.
yeah, we can take it for granted, but I think it still needs just even a few lines,
Mhm.
something somewhere just to impress that this is not a one time. You don't just do it one time. Like getting that shade of pink off the dead body is occurring because of the way that dead body was decomposing, right? So
Yes.
you're only going to get more of that shade if you continue to scrape it off of dead bodies, right?
Well, that's
Uh,
one aspect of what they're establishing, but the character of Chumani, who is the Sioux, she's also head of synthesizing the color. So it seems to me like once you find the
yeah.
color, she's able to rate the levels of hues and saturations and
Uh,
aspects of it, and then replicate it that way. But that's where we're missing
I
how she
yeah,
does that.
I don't like that explanation personally.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
missing a little bit.
I can believe it scientifically to a degree, but it's also saying like AI is gonna replace humans, which it might, right? But I mean, we're talking about something that's so finite here, right? You put so much attention in the story into the careful process of creating this brilliant hue that it cheapens it in my mind by saying you can just synthesize it once you discover it, you know?
I mean,
Uh,
maybe it can be, and maybe it can't. I like again. I would like some more elaboration on that. Like, what is the
yeah,
process of
at the
how do
very
they
least.
synthesize it? Because again, there's something that comes as a result of the confrontation between Dolly and Sydney, where she gets a color, and it's like, well, the color is unique from that. How can they, how can they find more of that source when that source is now gone? And they kind of
Yeah.
allude to that Chumani is the one that is able to figure out how to replicate it. Well, how close can they get to the original? I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of science that is missing from this script that I think would make it a bit more convincing on that part of it, because right now, and I fully on your side on this. Like your average reader, your average audience member is going to look at this and be like thinking, "Oh God, they're torturing that animal, that bear, to get this color." Clearly, they're going to have to be doing that like factory farming style if they want to keep
Yeah,
going, right?
right.
Like that's
Well,
I
because
would say that they're
we
wrong
think
for
of
that.
that.
Yeah.
We understand that happens in the real world anyways,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so yeah, the average audience member isn't going to default to synthesize to the fact that they can just synthesize it once they have it.
Yeah, you'd
And
have to
frankly,
show us how they do that with their tech in order to make it work.
I'll see you on this one too.
Mhm.
If they want to go with that explanation, that's fine insofar as that would tell us that the company is saying, you know, we only have to do it once, and
Right.
then we're doing all this good. So I kind of like that, but I need it. I need a better explanation than one line in the
Yeah, it needs
script
to be
somewhere
stronger in that.
offhand.
We need to see the process. Like, oh, here's they come up with the color, they have it like in a vial, and then they give it to Chumani, and she takes it over to maybe a very elaborate paint mixing station, and then she starts analyzing the hues and all the levels and whatnot, and then she just enters them in, and then it slowly replicates the color. And if she gets it wrong, she like tosses it out and she makes adjustments and does it, because then we kind of start realizing, oh, okay, so this is how they replicate the color. But then it also throws in another aspect, which is, well, since they have all the tools here, why don't they just experiment with the generation of the colors of itself, like just from imagination and whatnot, instead of just finding them existing in the world and then mixing and matching to kind of balance it out? It's like, well, you have all of these base colors that you've already developed over the years of this company. Why not just have them all replicate those stations for all the employees and have them all just kind of mix and match and play around with it until they find what they're looking for, as opposed to these outdoor excursions and all these other avenues where they're looking for the natural colors. Like it raises questions that could further be explored, and we would need justifications as to, well, we don't do this because the colors that the original dyes that they use are very expensive. We can't just waste them on mixing and matching and whatnot. Or maybe they're looking at it from, it's about the natural colors that we find. We don't want to artificially invent a color.
Yeah,
We want to find the natural one, give it its life, and then replicate that life through the expensive means we use with our own dyes or something of that nature. But it's the one like gap in this script that I think would have been fun to explore a little bit more, for us to see them kind of obfuscate that in some cases they do bad things to get the color for the benefit of the world, and this is how they can justify that one bad thing, as opposed to kind of setting up something where an audience would infer, oh, they're going to have cages of animals of all different types and do these types of tortures to them in order to, supply this particular color for this particular company.
And it doesn't need 10 or 20 pages written
No.
to do it. Even in this particular case, you can show us that the employees are in fact using these existing colors to try and mix and match and get creative. But you could have someone like Latrice just with a one-line point, even in this case, a one-line mention, that, yeah, but if you really want to make it to the top of the company, if you really want to change the world, you can't, the people who just who mix and match the existing colors, they don't achieve that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, it's because these colors that you can have 20 employees in a room doing that process, right? So these employees are very important to us, but they are using colors that still had to be created in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody has to create the color the first time in order for these employees to mix and match colors for these reasonably successful companies and advertising pushes. That they aren't top level, but
Yeah.
You know what? You'll do fine if you want to join them, but it's going to take a little more if you want to create something that hasn't been created before.
Kind of like the Mike TV from Willy Wonka. It's like, here's how it works. Just that one quick scene.
Yeah, you don't need 20 minutes to show it, but you do need just a little bit of something to explain that hierarchy. Because I'm happy that I can believe this company intends to do good, but I do want to know more about the hierarchy. It kind of builds that ominousness,
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because, and I'll put it to you this way: we're kind of getting close to the spoiler territory, but not too much, because the big conflict that really kind of shows you the level of commitment this company has comes as a result between Dolly and Sydney. They get into a physical confrontation, and Sydney is tossed over the railing of her apartment.
Yeah, Dolly thinks that Sydney spiked her color.
Yes.
To win. And
what's really weird is that Sydney's eyeball is left behind, to put it oddly.
Yeah.
And her body's on the ground, and Dolly takes the eyeball and kind of gets out of dodge, so to speak. And from that eyeball, there's a little bit of a purple in it, in the iris, and she uses that purple to add to Sydney's original color and makes it work. But she doesn't put her name on it. She keeps it under Sydney's name. And when they test the color, and it works exceedingly well, and it's so good that it actually gets its own flag at points, that's when they find out that Sydney had died. And so she got what Sydney wanted, which is to be immortalized with inventing this color at the expense of her own life. But what's interesting is that Latrice doesn't quite buy it, and that starts the second half of the movie into this mystery of will Dolly be caught, especially when the police start investigating how Sydney fell to her death.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's framed that, at least the way Dolly frames it, is that Sydney took her own life knowing that it was the only way to complete the color.
Or knowing that she could never do any better than that, yeah.
Yeah. And then, obviously her co-workers, Latrice, they're like, okay, this person is, Sydney was not.
She was great, but she was not this level. Like, that's kind of what she realized. And, you've got a little bit of a cat and mouse moment there. What's unfortunate is, like, as Dolly is getting more prominent in this company, she's getting more confident, I don't know if you inferred this or not, but I got the feeling that Dolly and Lenny were kind of dating um, as she was getting more
Yeah,
recognition at the company.
it's not explicit, but they clearly are affectionate with each other. There's no
Mm-hmm.
like kissing or anything like that. They never go on an actual date. But yes, there's a loving affection for sure.
Yeah, there's some sort of camaraderie here. It's right up to the edge of intimacy, but we never explore anything of that nature. Um, and yeah, like that's because Dolly and Lenny are at the celebration where we actually get to see some of the board members who come up and say like this amazing color is now going into our archives. It's going to be on display at our headquarters. It's something we're very proud of, and this woman who made it is going to be remembered within our company and in history whenever this color is used in any sort of history text or research or anything with regards to if anyone Googles what this color is, they're going to learn about her. And it's a heck of a celebration. And Latrice is one of the only ones there that realizes that Dolly's probably the one that did it and knows more about what's going on with Sydney's death than anyone else. And that's kind of where we get into like the suspense aspect of this movie. And it takes a minute to get there because they pepper little, oh, this is not as ideal as it looks, but they're doing good things type of stuff. And then once this happens, where, someone has died in order for this color to exist, almost deliberately so, that's when you start realizing or questioning how many other people have probably given their lives for this company just for the sake of a color. And is that worth it? Is it really worth it overall? And that's a good question that this script kind of explores.
Yeah, and when I was reading it and I was looking at the page count and all that, I'm with you there. It's like it does take a minute to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to stop and ask myself, feels like it's a little bit out of the standard structure, right? In that you would almost expect this to happen sooner.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate that it took us time getting this to this point because there was so much value in building the characters and the nature of the company and the process up to this point, right?
It was, and it's one of the few scripts where I'm like, because I have these notes here, I'm at page 26. I'm liking the story, but I don't know what is going to happen next. I'm thinking about what could, but I'm not 100% sure where it's going to go. And I'm like, it could be bad, but it could be good. But so far, it's been good, so I'm kind of on the good side. And then, yeah, every 20 pages or so, I keep on saying like, yeah, I wasn't expecting a friendship between, like I was expecting more of a romance between Lenny and Dolly, but they made it more of a friendship type. There's also a point where Dolly kind of burns off her ring finger, making a color.
Oh yeah,
which
forgot about that. Yeah.
And she doesn't care, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm seeing now what's going on here. Like, yes, this is a guy taking some risks, and he's making them work, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of in at this point.
That's why I wanted to see just a little more emphasis on that side of Dolly.
Yeah,
and I love that sequence, but it doesn't have to be anything huge. Just sort of like give us some, and it can be visual cues. This can be something that can be accomplished in filming, but just showing us her ability to like that. Yeah, she doesn't care about that. Like it's like there was a higher importance than losing her finger, right?
Yes.
And I love that sequence, but just little bits and pieces that I think go a long way to show us that second side of her, beyond simply, just kind of brings out that conflict a little bit more,
It does, and I just like that. Okay, we're going to frame this into the dedication of how much are you willing to sacrifice, and I like this because this is also the quote unquote artist mentality. We've seen this in some other satirical works. Like there's one with John Malkovich called Art School Confidential, which involves like murder and artists and pretentiousness and whatnot, and it's a satire that makes fun of the art world, and I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of doing it too, but it's not a satire. It's actually just like they're changing it into more of like, a dark thriller. Like they want to let you know that like this is kind of some bad attitude to elicit something good. and it's the character of this journey of how far is she willing to go. She's already sacrificed a finger. She then, through an accident, very similar to her bully situation when she was 10, sacrifices a coworker. What will she sacrifice next, or will she stop herself? And like that's the question that's looming over the rest of the script, without us getting into any spoilers, because I think that's kind of like where we have to cut it off on the discussion part of things, at least with the details of what's involved, because it's a good question to have, and I think that's kind of what made this script kind of resonate with me, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I say, I mentioned this before the show. The last two times I was on, I had a lot of notes for those two scripts that we discussed,
Yeah.
including some things that I thought were completely breaking and had to be, completely redone. I don't feel at any point that this script needs any kind of like a total overhaul, right?
Mm-hmm.
My um, criticisms are things that can be polished up, right?
Yeah.
It which is to say, I really like this movie.
No, I mean,
I don't like it word for word as it's presently written. I think it needs another draft. It
right.
needs some
It needs some
things added
refinement,
yeah.
some tightening here and there. But I mean, I will say this: when I finished reading it, I'm like, this should have placed a little higher on the blacklist than where it did.
Exactly. I was like, how does this all the way? I mean, I'll say all the
I
way
mean,
down
it's in the
at
bottom
fifth
25 essentially, like that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not right.
This is way better than that.
Yeah, but I guess this gives us some insight into like the types of producers that are kind of reading and voting on these types of scripts, which is they're looking at this, and I think a majority of the ones that at least voted in favor of this were like, no, this is a low budget, potentially good, mid range film that will have its niche audience, but will definitely have a good return. Lots of room to discuss, characters and motivation, and it's a world we don't see. And I think because of that, they're probably looking at it, well, it's kind of low concept, because low concept is basically abstract. Not a whole lot of people will gravitate towards it. High concept is really easy, accessible. People will jump to it. It's guy with a gun. That's a high concept thing. Girl who can hear and see colors, kind of a low concept thing. So I think they were looking at it superficially in that regard. But this script actually has some depth. And in research for the script, I found out that the writer, who is Zach Strauss, he is also self-producing and directing this movie independently with some of his colleagues from a TV show he worked on a few years ago called Smilf. So currently, right now, it's got Hunter Schafer, who was in The Hunger Games recently. The recent run, it's got Nomi Rapace playing Latrice, and it's got Frankie Shaw playing Sydney. Those are the cast members that are announced right now. I think Frankie Shaw is probably also going to be a producer on this as well. So it looks like this movie actually might come out in the next year or so, which I'd be very interested to see do a script to screen type of comparison in the future, because I do hope it gets made, it gets distribution, it gets released, and we can check it out, because I think this movie is good enough for that.
I agree. I would move this ahead to answer that question that we usually get towards the end of the show, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be $100 million. You can do this on a reasonable budget. There's a lot of internal shots in rooms.
Yeah, well, I
Uh,
mean,
you- you're
it's
gonna-
an
you-
office building. Aside from having a
Yeah,
couple of
it's-
elaborate shots
you know.
inside, like this could be done easily for less than $5 million. And
I
with a budget that low, you're making your money back.
Yeah, and we need some movies like this.
Mhm.
I don't just want all of the big budget summer blockbusters that are completely safe and homogenized. We need some of these movies to get out there and grab some attention. But I also I got to say, I am really thrilled that Zach Strauss is going to, do it on his own and make this thing happen. But I really hope it it
Really hope he fixes
there's
some of the things that we caught.
yeah, well, I mean, first of all, hopefully there's somebody in there or some people in that group around him who can offer the criticisms necessary to make those touch-ups.
Yep.
And hopefully he has somebody with as good an eye for the camera as the character is supposed to have for color, because this movie will, to a certain degree, it has to have the visual like it needs somebody with a real imagination for how to present it visually.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a visual movie. Like, I mean, if those shots that kind of represent how Dolly sees the world don't land,
Yeah, it's
it's
not going to convince the audience to get lost in it. That's the problem.
yeah,
It's like you have to have a great cinematographer with an eye for not just framing the shot, but also with playing with light so that the colors that Dolly sees and that she tries to replicate really stand out, and not like in an abrasive way, but just in a way that causes the viewer's eyes to gravitate towards it. And that's going to be one heck of a challenge. But I'm crossing my fingers that they can pull that off, because that would make it stand out, in my opinion.
yeah, I hope so. And it's it's not something that you're gonna fix with CGI, and they won't have the budget to do that, right? It's something that you need somebody who actually knows, like you said, how to capture things in lens, like they
Yes.
always used to do for many decades, before before computers got involved. Um, if you got somebody with enough creativity, then because I think one thing I really loved about this movie, like I said, it's not completely fantastical. It is grounded in reality. It feels real, but there's also a bit of an unrealness to it, right? Because Dolly is seeing the world in a very different way than we are, and I don't mind if it slips into a kind of I don't know, I can't word on the tip of my tongue, but it feels like some sort of other kind of reality when we see it, when we see the world through her eyes.
Like an
I
Alice
don't
in
mind it,
Wonderland type thing, right? Yeah.
yeah, but it still needs to be grounded,
Mm-hmm.
right? It still needs to have that earthiness to it. Um, and hey, if they pull it off,
Yeah, if they do, I mean, you and I guess we're in agreement here. We'd greenlight this movie, and luckily, the writer is also the director, so he's pushing through with that, which I'm quite excited for. We two are not the only ones. Over on the Patreon, remember, guys, if you signed up to the Patreon and you see on Mondays the script that we're going to be reviewing, you can make a comment as well, such as RS did. He said, "Such a great read, so mesmerizing about a world I've never heard of." And that's one of the things that intrigued me about this is, yeah, I never gave thought much to this level of color and the world and the types of people and the companies that are involved in finding them and distributing them out there for all of us to enjoy and use for our own means. So I mean that's a good consensus so far. And yeah, so CC, any final thoughts regarding palette before we call it for the
I
night?
no, that's it. I mean, like I said, if this movie lands and just like when I finished reading the script and I visualized it in my head, it left me, say leaving the theater, actually looking at these things and thinking about it. It made that imprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, where I'm looking at all the colors around me and thinking about, you know, the the companies and the detail and the process behind the selection of them. And I think that should the movie hit the mark the way the script does for the most part, then the audience is going to get that reaction, which is what you want,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want them to remember it, not just to kind of forget about it like some usual dribble.
Yeah, this does not come across as like a disposable script or story that some of the bigger films we've been getting recently have. Like there's in-depth character. I mean, each character has their own distinct voice, which I really liked. Like I never got lost in wondering who's speaking at what any given time. I kind of knew just from the word choice that this was Sydney or this was Latrice or this was Dolly or this was Lenny. Like it was just very easy to pick up on that. I didn't have to double check like who's the character that's this for. And I also didn't pick up any grammar or spelling mistakes in the script either. Like that's
true.
it's
And the scenes are numbered.
Yeah.
I don't know how regular that is, but the writer numbered every scene.
Oh yeah, like that's kind of standard. Like not every writer does that, but I think because he probably intended to maybe direct itself, he decided to number
True.
his scenes. But yeah, and then even the little tricks, like how he said, for in any case where there's sign language being occurring, we're going to denote that with some parentheses and some bold, so that you know this is sign language. And so anytime you kind of go from regular dialogue to sign language, this is how it's conveyed, and it's conveyed quickly to the point where it doesn't stop the script. It's really well done, and I guess to give people heads up for when this does get released, there will be subtitles for the sign language stuff, obviously.
And the sound designer better be on it.
Yeah. And yeah, so like this is a double green light, which we haven't had in a while, so I'm happy for that. But this is the type of stuff I like to show and share with people out there in this space. That even though this is not like a big tentpole film, this is definitely not going to be a blockbuster of sorts. It most likely will be profitable just by distribution itself.
It's the kind of movie that your friend might recommend to you 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Which that there are some of them out there that are not or still aren't big, still maybe never got the attention they deserved. But I can see that.
Yeah, I can see that having a following. I can see it being kind of a hidden gem. And then if one of the actors kind of breaks out into a big role, this movie will be cited as part of their resume for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
It's that's what its place is, and I think that's a good place for this type of movie. And if it does, get a little bigger or gets a little traction, all the better, because it's different. I mean, it's part of the whole. A little bit of conspiracy, a little bit of empathy, a little bit of, ends justify the means theme. So it's got those familiarities, but it's a different world. And the last act I really enjoyed as well. It's kind of gut-wrenching, but it's good. And
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything.
Mm-hmm.
I will suggest... the movie could end a half page sooner.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't ruin it. Does not ruin it for me.
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But it could,
Mm-hmm.
and there would be a real impact to not explaining anything further.
Yes. I agree. That'd be that if it does end that way or the way that you suggest, both would be fine. But I think the way you suggest might be a little bit stronger. It'd pique that intrigue a bit more.
If it was up to me, I would cut that last half page out. But but again, I'm okay with it either way. It's just that would be my preference.
Yeah. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone out there listening live tonight and on the replay. Again, if you want to read the script, it is available out there. You can Google it and find it, but if you are having trouble and you promise not to start sharing it on a viral level, just reach out to me on Twitter, X, at ScriptDoctorPhD, or join the Patreon, or send me a message by email at at thescriptdoctorphd@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to hook you up so you can give it a read yourself. And if this thing comes out and it's available to like stream or whatnot, well, we should just come back and compare the final product to this episode. That'd be great. That'd be a really good discussion, because I'd love to see how they execute this.
Yeah, I'd be excited to do that, to see that, see what they changed, see how they executed it.
Yeah. So, with that being said, before we call it a night, Cece, where can our audience find you?
Well, my main gig is karaoke, but you can certainly find me on Midnight's Edge After Dark with Tom Connors and usually Script Doctor and others that you may be familiar with on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. And I do a karaoke show usually on Fridays, but not this week. I'm going off on a road trip, so I'm going to be kind of packing for that for a few days.
Cool,
But
cool.
uh,
But
yeah,
yeah, and his link is in the chat there. And if you follow us on the socials, you'll see us up on all the other channels that we have, including this one here. So, dude, thank you again for joining me this Saturday to discuss a really great script, like a
uh,
nice, a proper palate cleanser, pun
yeah, I'm
intended.
glad to be back, and yeah, I'm glad that I got the chance to participate in discussing a really great script. As often as we discuss ones that aren't that great, it's just really nice to find a bit of a gem.
And you know,
So
it's just like with movies. Like, yeah, there's a lot out there that's kind of stink, but when you find a good one, you kind of want to talk about it. And you know, I think so far, like we've done 27 episodes so far. I think we have enough of a pattern to say that there are still original scripts out there. It just needs the right encouragement to get it in the right hands so that we get to enjoy it as well. This one here, I think, qualifies as an original script, and I do look forward to it. And I do wish all the best for Zach and his team to put this together and make it a really good romp to watch.
fully agree.
All right. So, with that, everyone, I want to wish all of my American friends a wonderful 4th of July, Independence Day long weekend. We'll see you next week when we tackle our next script. Remember, guys, if you want to get a jump on things and support the channel, support the show, please consider sharing the link and signing up for Patreon. It comes with a 7-day free trial, so there's no financial risk at all, but if you do support, much appreciated. And if not, thank you so much for taking the time with us. Have a wonderful weekend until next week. And never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.